Today we are going to be comparing every single AFL football club to a wrestler in WWE, either past or present. Now, I'll be basing this on sort of two main factors. One is their relative success, so we're trying to map like premierships onto WWE championships or World Heavyweight Championships, along with my own personal impression of each team. So look, this is going to be very much my list. You're probably going to disagree with a lot of the comparisons I make, which is fine, but I would love it if you disagree with one of them to put a better example in the comments of what you think a better comparison between the teams and the wrestlers are. With that out of the way, let us begin. Number one, Adelaide is Dolph Ziggler. Adelaide has had 2 premiership wins. Dolph Ziggler has 2 World Heavyweight Championship wins. And similar to how Adelaide finished outside the top 4 and still won the premiership, Dolph Ziggler was awarded one of his championships rather than winning it. Which sort of means they probably weren't the best at the time overall. But hey, premiership's a premiership. Championship's a championship. Totally fine with it. They're consistent and they can usually make a good appearance towards the top of the competition, but I'm not that excited by either of them anymore. Brisbane Lions are Stone Cold Steve Austin. Now, Stone Cold is considered one of the best wrestlers of all time for good reason, but actually he only spent about 4 years at the top of the WWE card. And that is how many years Brisbane Lions appeared in grand finals. And of course they won 3 of them. And in those 4 years, both Brisbane Lions and Stone Cold were the biggest thing in their respective competitions. They were the one to beat. Carlton is The Undertaker. They are instrumental to the prestige and the importance of the league. Carlton is a very, very old football team, one of the oldest. Undertaker has been around forever. And they still inspire a lot of faith, a lot of confidence. Just like when you hear the start of the Undertaker's theme, the gong sound, everyone will cheer. You always get the same reaction when the Carlton theme song starts playing. However, let's be real, it's been a while since both of them have actually been any good. Collingwood is Shawn Michaels. For a very, very long time, they were the most hated entity in their competition. Collingwood, it was on field. Shawn Michaels, it was backstage. Regardless, you can't deny that they are very, very, very good historically. You hate them, but you've got to respect what they've achieved. 15 premierships for Collingwood, and Shawn Michaels in the 90s was unstoppable. Since his comeback in 2002, Michaels has had this reputation of being Mr. WrestleMania, until he retired. Despite having this reputation of putting on really big matches, he never actually won that many of those WrestleMania matches post-comeback. And that's, I think, similar to how Collingwood is always historically in grand finals, but historically loses quite a lot of them. So big matches doesn't always win them. The biggest difference, of course, is now people love Shawn Michaels and everyone still hates Collingwood. But we move. Essendon is John Cena. Now, I have this image of Essendon as a very, very clean-cut, straight-faced, a baby-faced football team, if you will. They're not really dirty, they're sort of proper. And I think that matches with John Cena quite well. On top of that, both of them have 16 wins apiece. 16 premierships for Essendon, record along with Carlton, and 16 with John Cena, record with Ric Flair. They are just the good guys of their respective competitions. Now, the biggest difference, of course, Essendon was recently in a massive drug scandal, which doesn't match the John Cena a comparison very well. But if you listen to my grandma, you'll find out that actually all the teams were taking supplements at the time, and they just blamed it on Essendon because it's all politics. So, yeah, works out. Fremantle is Lacey Evans. I like Lacey Evans, and I like Fremantle, but in the same way that Lacey Evans is overshadowed by some of the other, bigger names in the women's division, I feel like Fremantle has been overshadowed by West Coast historically as like the best team in Western Australia. Haven't won the big one yet. You feel like it's going to happen in the future, but, they're good. They're good, I'm fine with them. I bear them no ill will. Geelong is Bret Hart. Great tradition behind both of them. Bret Hart, the Hart Dynasty. Geelong, the second oldest team in the whole league. And they're certainly both very proud of those respective histories. However, if I had one word to describe Bret Hart, besides good at wrestling, 3 words, it would be bitter, and I think it's not just me that says that. A lot of people say, Bret Hart is really embittered by his wrestling experience, which is understandable. He was, had the Montreal screw job, and, his brother dying in the ring, and, complete misuse in WCW once you left WWE. And I get that same impression from Geelong. Maybe it's the fact that they're outside the city. They're always on the outside looking in. They're sort of embittered by their experience. Regardless, a lot of success for both of them. Can't take that away from either of them. Gold Coast is Sin Cara. They were brought into the competition with a lot of fanfare and a lot of expectations. It was a big deal when both of them joined. However, a culture of attitude problems behind the scenes meant neither of them have filled those expectations, and neither of them have lived up to their potential. GWS is Andrade Cien Almas. Brought into the competition with a lot of fanfare and a lot of expectations. They haven't matched them yet, but you feel like they are on the way. They are really close to becoming like a really dominant force. And I think there's a lot of potential with both of them. Hawthorne is Brock Lesnar, a force to be reckoned with for almost all of their respective histories. They are brutal and effective. You may not like them, and you may wish they would lose, but you've got to respect what they bring to the game, and you've got to respect that at the end of the day, they get the results. Melbourne is Dusty Rhodes. So the oldest team, Melbourne, and Dusty Rhodes, who is, another one of these really seminal figures in the history of wrestling. You can't imagine the league without Melbourne, and a lot of people would say, modern day wrestling, a lot of that is owed to Dusty Rhodes' work in the 70s and 80s. However, there is an element of, tragedy. Melbourne haven't won a flag since '64, despite being so popular and so important, and, despite all of the accolades you can give to Dusty Rhodes, once he came to WWE, he was misused, and he never reached those heights that I think you'd probably expect for him. So, very important to the history, but, a long sort of decline for both of them. North Melbourne is Rey Mysterio. They've only had a few times at the top of the ladder, but in the same way you've got that underdog spirit with the small Rey Mysterio, you've got the shin boner spirit with North Melbourne. Definitely not the biggest, but they've got a lot of heart, and you can't take that away from them. Port Adelaide is Sting, okay? They were the best in the other competition. Port Adelaide was the best in the SAFL. Sting was the best in WCW, but in the big time, the AFL and WWE, they never matched those heights yet. Port had a time at the top in 2004. They won their only premiership. Sting had, those two matches in WWE were really high profile matches, so they've had their time, but probably the history they have is more important than their current legacy. Port fans have been proven wrong. If they win next year, I'll take it all back. Richmond is Charlotte Flair. They're really good. They're really, really good, and you're not sure if you like them or not because of it. Charlotte Flair is, hands down the biggest name in women's wrestling. Richmond is currently one of the most dominant teams in the league. You respect them, but you don't like them because of it. You want someone else to get a chance. At least that's me. St Kilda is Christian. Okay, huge fan base. Always really popular. They're in high school, everyone went for St Kilda, it felt like. And similar, everyone loves Christian. No one is going to say Christian's a bad wrestler or, have any bad words against his ability. However, Christian only got sort of one chance at the top of the competition, and that was sort of due to a fluke when Edge had to retire due to injury, so they gave him the title because he was his best friend. Similarly, St Kilda's only won one flag in 1966, and it was sort of a fluke as well. I mean, it was a 1-point victory that came from like a big kick from like the 50-meter line. Look, that's still a win. Let's not diss that, but even though it was against Collingwood, as most of these are because they've been in a lot of grand finals. But again, sort of a lot of luck in both of those times at the top, but they still have a big fan base. Sydney is Natalia, or Natty Neidhart. Great wrestling pedigree, a strong tradition. Again, with Natalia, it's the Hart dynasty, one of the most important family in wrestling. She's got connections to that. With Sydney, it is the South Melbourne Swans. They've got that lineage, you know, there's a strong tradition in both their backgrounds. They've both had some time at the top since. They've never really been the team for too long though, but they've had their successes. West Coast, I like this one. West Coast is Rob Van Dam. They had a lot of success in the 90s, but they reached their peak in 2006 before drug problems derailed them. I guess you could say they also recently had a resurgence in 2011. Rob Van Dam living his best life on TNA and West Coast, beating Collingwood in the granny. But we don't have to talk about that anymore, and we won't. Western Bulldogs is Eddie Guerrero, the scrappy, feisty, bit of a dirty player, but you like them nonetheless. And I think you can make a lot of connections with Eddie Guerrero's 2004 win, overcoming the odds, with Western Bulldogs, winning seemingly out of nowhere in, I think, 2016. Again, that sort of scrappy underdog, working class spirit is embodied in both of them. Now, quick bonus round, we're going to go over the defunct teams, just as a bit of fun. Brisbane Bears is Isaac Yankum. Similar to how Glenn Jacobs in the 90s was Isaac Yankum before he moved into bigger and better things when he became Kane. Brisbane Bears in the 90s moved on to bigger and better things when they merged with Fitzroy to become the Brisbane Lions. Fitzroy itself, I've got to go with Andre the Giant. Again, a really old team, a really strong history behind both of them. But there's a tragedy there, you know. Fitzroy didn't win a flag from 1944 until they were finally disbanded in 1996. Long, slow decline. Similarly, tragically, Andre, his body just sort of couldn't keep up with his condition and he died. So, bit of a sad one there. And University, the team that was only in the league for like 6 years at the start of the century. University is Shane Douglas in his Dean Douglas gimmick, because University and Dean of a university. It works. Shush. Shut up. That is my list. Alright, that is my personal impressions, my interpretation of which AFL team is which WWE wrestler. If you disagree with it, that is totally cool, but you've got to give me a better team. You know, if you don't like one team being compared to one wrestler, give me a better example. I'm really, really excited actually to read the comments and see what other, connections people are making, because this is all just based on my personal interpretation. Hope you are all keeping safe. Think we're about to go into stage 4 lockdown in Victoria. That'll be fun. Don't even know what that means. But, stay safe and wear a mask and go Pies. If Pies win the premiership, I'm totally counting it as a legitimate premiership. I've said this before. Any team that wins, the coronavirus premiership cup is going to be tainted, because it's the whole season was interrupted, there were no fans or anything, blah blah blah. Unless it's Collingwood, then it's yep, nah, Collingwood won. Don't care. Collingwood won. It counts. Whatever. Shut up. Cheers.